Hey, Matt Sitter here, CEO of AFN. Uh, One of the things that we talk about a lot on AFN is that change is where opportunity happens. And the best way to find opportunity in change is a network that is diverse in experience, expertise, and perspective. The events that we have are meant to bring subject matter experts to us to help us think about new and interesting ways to look at the world and find new opportunities. AFN is a CEO and Chief of Staff network. And it's a membership group, but we open up a lot of our events to the general public as well. Today, I have Patrick Asare with me. I've known Patrick for a long time, turns out more than 20 years. We went to business school together, and Patrick is really interesting. His story is amazing. He's right now he's principal at UGI Energy Services. Throughout his career, he's been an electrical engineer, educator, and financial analyst. He also wrote a book called The Boy from Boadua, about his experience growing up in Ghana and subsequent education in the Soviet Union, coming to the United States, and what the success that he's found since then. We're going to spend a lot of time talking about what the opportunities are just by virtue of how the world is changing in Africa and how we're aging in the rest of the world. But Patrick, great to have you here. Really looking forward to talking.
Yeah, thank you, Matt. And yeah, always nice to talk to a good friend and classmate. Yeah.
Um, so as I mentioned, as we were opening up, change is where opportunity happens. Well, change is definitely here in a lot of ways. The median age in the United States is 38. Median age worldwide is 30. Median age in Ghana, and this is representative somewhat of the continent of Africa, is 20. Half of the population of Africa is under the age of 19, two-thirds under the age of 25. So Africa is going to be a source of consumption and of talent going forward. And if you juxtapose this against what we're seeing in the rest of the world, we see birth rates declining in many places. We've seen Japan's population going down for quite some time. China's population is starting to decline. There's all sorts of interesting things that are going to happen as a result of that. So Patrick, maybe just to get us started, how do you think Ghana's changed since you left there?
Um, so I left Ghana in 1985 to go to college in the Soviet Union. And in the, I don't know, almost 40 years now, in the 40 years that has come and gone since then, the country has changed a lot. And when I left in 85, it was mostly an agrarian economy. So most of the people there were just subsistence farmers, which my parents did for many years. And and then in the decades since then, I mean, it's industrialized quite a bit, and so you have a lot of private businesses and industries, and it's developed into somewhat of a modern economy. It does have a lot of challenges, but I would say that's the main difference I can point to.
Yeah, it seems like there's a lot of urbanization that's happened. More
Yes.
than 50% of the population now is in cities.
Yeah. Yeah. Yes. Yeah. There was a lot of migration from rural areas to the big centers, Accra, Kumasi, and the major cities. Yes.
So thinking about let's just track down the idea of entrepreneurialism, because I think that Ghana and Africa generally should be a source of entrepreneurialism going forward.
Yeah.
Your sister was an entrepreneur when you were growing up, right,
Yeah.
in the very
Yeah.
traditional sense, but the
Yeah.
scale was limited. Tell me how
Yes.
you think about how she was an entrepreneur versus what the entrepreneurial opportunities are now for, someone who's in their mid 20s.
Yeah, very interesting question. So my sister, I mean, who uh, she was illiterate actually. She never had any education. And so back then, if you talked about an entrepreneur in Ghana, I mean, it was someone putting a few items like a small table by the wayside and selling them to people walking by. So that's basically what my sister was doing. She was selling fish and vegetables in the market. And so very low capital required for something like that, and very small scale. And so that's what when he talked about business people in Ghana at the time, which this was in the 60s, 70s, and into the 1980s, that was a picture. Fast forward to today, and today the businesses are a lot bigger, require more capital, much more capital than that. And so there's a lot of import export happening. And so people go to China, they go to Europe and import all kinds of stuff. And so the economy is a lot more dynamic than it used to be, and requires a lot more capital, which means finance and credit becomes a lot more important than it used to be.
Uh, how is the financial services system set up for folks to be able to get access to credit, which seems like it's a really important generator of growth?
Yes, correct. So, there are quite a few banks. When I was growing up in Ghana, there were just probably a couple of state-owned banks, but those banks are still there. But now there are a lot of private banks that provide credit loans to people starting businesses. The problem is the cost of capital is extremely high, and so taking a bank loan to do anything to start in a business is not an easy thing, and given how high the rates are, it's a challenge to take that kind of loan, run a business and make a profit. So that is one of the limiting factors of expanding business expansion on the continent, not only in Ghana but Africa as a whole. So that I would point to as one of the major challenges.
Just for a basis of comparison, do you have a sense of what some of the interest rates are that you'd see in Ghana?
Yeah, so business loans would run you probably 20-25%. Some could get as high as 30-35%. And so yeah, it's next to impossible to make a profit on anything taking that kind of credit.
Yeah, that's a tremendous burden.
Yeah.
Well, maybe as we think about, what are some of the enablers? So we're saying like, hey, we're going to see this huge number of people entering
Yeah.
into the workforce. These are going to be people with a lot of energy and who are seeing opportunities that are unique to that part of the world, but also can be extended out to the world generally. What are some of the things that you think we have to do to enable that entrepreneurialism to take root and really make sure that we can deliver the value that would be useful for both people in Ghana, but also the broader globe?
Yeah. So two key things. Number one is education. So you mentioned my book. The whole point of the book was I was sort of laying out the challenges that existed at the time when I was growing up around education, educational opportunities for children, and it was an environment in which very few people, most of the population lived in rural areas, and most children didn't have the opportunity to go beyond primary middle school. And so that sort of trapped a lot of the population in illiteracy and poverty. Things have improved since then. So now there is in Ghana there is free high school education, but the funding for that system is very limited, and so that translates to sort of poor quality of education. So when you have a young population that's not properly educated, I mean that's sort of a toxic mix. You mix that with poverty and unemployment. And so that is the big challenge. So Ghana and the rest of Africa, the continent is going to have to figure out a way to improve the quality of education on the continent as a whole. And you talk about what the rest of the world can do to aid that effort. So you talk about foreign aid. Foreign aid has always been an important component of development in Africa through the World Bank and other multinational lenders, government to government aid programs and stuff. So that's going to be important going forward. So that, and then the second big thing is energy. Any modern economy requires energy to run it, and Africa, Ghana, and the whole of Africa have, for decades, have challenges for their energy systems as we speak. There are rolling blackouts in Ghana for weeks now, and so in that kind of environment, if you're running a business, it is a big challenge. I mean, to have to go find your own private generators. I mean, to generate power to run your business, and so that's those are the two main challenges that the continent and the development partners, as we call them, will have to sort of think about. I mean, the United States has for a couple of decades now been the US, Europe, China to some extent have been providing, loans and sort of assistance programs to beef up the energy, system on the continent. But I mean, it's not been, too successful thus far. So that there's a lot of work to be done in those two areas.
Well, just to focus on the education piece first.
Yeah.
So we've seen, I mean, just the way you and I are communicating, okay, through COVID, it became normal for people to talk the way that we're talking across the world.
Yes.
And so the technological opportunity, and that can be distributed, right? You and I were talking a little bit about telecoms, right?
Yeah.
You don't have to have the same level of infrastructure for everyone to have a cell phone, for everyone to have access to the internet. How do you think that's impacting education on a broad basis? Is it or is it nice, but needs to be other enablers in place?
So telecom is a godsend really for a continent like Africa because to be connected to the world, you need to observe. We talk about sort of mentoring and looking at best practices. I mean, you need to look at the rest of the world to see what is going on out there in the world. I mean, to know what you need to do yourself, right? So when I was growing up in Africa in the 70s and 80s, I mean, we were mostly in the dark because there was no, cell phone, there was no Facebook, there was no internet. And so you couldn't really see much, right? But now, the kid in my village, Boadua, has a cell phone in their hands. I mean, they can tap into the internet and see what's going on in Europe, the US, Canada. And so that's eye-opening. And so that alone to me is education. I mean, it broadens your horizon. But the challenge is, I go back to energy. So you have cell phone, you have all these systems, but then your power doesn't, your power goes out. And so your cell phone battery is dead and you can't charge it. I mean, you have to be on the internet and you don't have power. I mean, I remember about a year ago, I'm on the Dartmouth admissions ambassador program. So some years I interview undergraduate applicants to the university. And I remember interviewing a young lady from Cameroon last year. Uh, and we had set up a time for the interview, and then the time came and I logged onto my computer and was waiting, and then she was late a couple of minutes, and then a few minutes later she came on, and she was sitting in the dark because the light, the power had gone out, and fortunately, I mean, she had enough charge on her cell phone. I mean, to do this. So she was using her cell phone light. I mean, for the interview. And so in the middle of the interview, I mean, we're probably almost to the end of the interview before the lights came on, and so you have all these sort of capabilities in your hand, but then the infrastructure that runs, I mean, these things, is really shaky. And so to really take advantage of, all these, sort of products out there, you need the basic infrastructure. And so I would go back to education and, very, very robust energy infrastructure for the continent to really take advantage of its young population.
Right, right. Well, yeah, and I mean, I think that it's really interesting the difference between the telecoms infrastructure that's required and the energy infrastructure. Okay, we got cell
Yeah,
phones, which means we don't have phone lines that we got to have everywhere,
exactly. Yeah.
but you still got to be able to get the power from where it's being generated to where
Yes.
people need it.
Yes.
Um, things like things like distributed solar and things like that. How do you see that having an influence on the power needs of people?
Yeah. So that's I'm glad you brought it up. You brought it up. That has been talked about, a lot, and so that is one of the solutions. And so if you live in a village like where I grew up, that is, that's going to be helpful because you can run, a couple of light bulbs, and you can probably charge your cell phone and do a few things, watch television maybe. But the and so that is talked about a lot at a macro level, and so a lot of the development agencies and NGOs, hammer on that. But having worked in the energy sector for probably 2, 3 decades, um, that is not a viable solution at this point. In the US and even in Europe, sometimes get as much as 30-40% of their energy from wind and solar sources.
Right.
But to do that, you need a very, very strong foundation. So when you talk about renewable energy, you are talking about batteries because when the sun is not shining and the wind is not blowing,
Yep.
you need to store, the power that you can generate during the day. You need to store it somewhere so you can use it at night. And so you're talking about batteries. Battery technology is not very, it's not there yet, right? So in the US, we have the luxury of having a very, very robust electricity grid. And so that is our battery. That's a giant battery that we have. And so when the sun goes down and the wind doesn't blow, we can fall on gas generated power, nuclear generated power, and so these things they are sort of dependent on each other. And in Africa, we don't have that. We don't have that sort of giant battery that the grid itself represents. And so you can run a couple of light bulbs using some solar panels, but you cannot run a factory
Sure.
that way. You
Yeah.
need a grid. And so for the foreseeable future, when the world talks about net zero, We are talking 2030. 2030 is sort of the front of this our journey, but it's really 2050. Net zero, when you hear net zero, is 2050. But if you look at International Energy Agency projections, I mean, when you look at the charts they show, in 2050 the world is still going to use at least 50% fossil fuels
Okay.
in 2050 and beyond. And so this idea that we can do away with fossil fuels and traditional sources of power generation, and it's not realistic. And so that is one message that needs to get across in Africa and in the developed world. I mean, that's one of the mistakes, I mean, the developed world makes when they talk about, when they go to a place like Africa and they talk about, making the transition, because the transition needs to happen, but it needs to happen in a well thought out way. When the war started in Ukraine, for example, Europe all of a sudden, changed the tune from transition to energy security, right? So you do what you have to do. When Putin shut off the gas lines and stopped the supplies to Europe, I mean they had to fall back on coal, and so you have to do what you have to do. I mean, to get your people the jobs and the whatever they need to do, and so that is really, that conversation needs to happen in a thoughtful way, because if we don't do that, the continent of Africa is going to keep lagging behind. Yes.
So, I mean, energy generation, it sounds like that is certainly one thing, right? So
Yeah.
you can have, fossil fuels that you're burning,
Yeah.
natural gas, oil, etc.
Yeah.
That's the first part of the equation. Then actually getting it to people is the second part, where you've got the
Yeah.
distribution mechanisms.
Yeah.
What has to happen on the distribution side for electricity to be broadly distributed, or is that less of the problem because we've got more people who are moving into cities now? How do you think about that?
So, so you put your finger right on the problem. The distribution system is really where the challenges are in a lot of Africa, and so yeah, you can generate all the power you can, but if you cannot move it effectively, then it's useless. It's there's no point generating it if you cannot move it properly, and so the distribution system is very, very weak in Ghana, in Nigeria, much of Africa, and so and that's the source of a lot of the blackouts I was talking about. It's all in the distribution system, and so that system is where a lot of the work needs to happen. Yeah, that's
And is that it's less sexy, arguably, than investing in generation.
yeah.
Uh, is it getting um, the attention that it needs from an investing perspective?
Um, what I see, what I see is the what I see, yeah, what I see in a lot of these places, Ghana, Nigeria in particular, it's not even identified as the weak link in the system.
Okay.
That's the problem. Everyone thinks. I mean, when the power goes out, everyone thinks there's not enough generation, right? You don't have enough generation. That's why the power went out. But that is not a problem. In Ghana, as we speak, I mean, we've overbuilt. I mean, we have twice as much capacity as the country needs. But because we cannot
Okay.
distribute it, everyone is sleeping in darkness, right? Um, so, so to solve a problem, you have to sort of know, what the cause of your problem is. And when I look at a continent, it doesn't strike me as though, I mean, people are focused properly on the source of the problem. I mean, they know it, but that's not where the effort is put.
Okay. Okay.
Yeah.
So we more focus there going forward.
Yes. Exactly. Yes.
Um, so as we've been talking, right, some of the demographic trends that we're talking about are extensible to all of the continent, but it's a
Yes.
collection of a bunch of individual countries with their own governments, a bunch of individual cultures.
Yeah.
What lessons do you think we can't transport from one country to another as we're thinking about entrepreneurialism coming out of Africa?
Yeah. Um, so yes, Africa. When people mention Africa in the advanced world, I mean, it's almost like one monolithic entity. But as you correctly say, I mean, Africa is a collection of 54 countries, and these are very, very different. Places with different languages, different cultures, different religions, and different levels of literacy. And so it is a very, very diverse continent that, if you are an American, business leader and you want to do business on the continent, I mean, these are things you need to sort of think about and sort of factor in. The differences in language, differences in culture, and how people approach education. There are some parts of Africa where in this day and age, women are not, women don't have the same access to education as boys do, and so, the cultural aspects of these places, and then, when we're in business school, I mean, we're taught, I mean, to pay attention to local cultures and things like that. So that's the one point that, anyone, from outside the continent, thinking about going there needs to keep in mind.
So, we can't say, hey, we're taking our business to Africa, and you're like, hey, we can just copy and paste all over the place. That
No,
doesn't, some of the
no,
concepts you might be able to use
yeah,
in different countries,
yeah,
but you still have
yeah,
to,
but
it sounds like you have to have a
exactly.
dedicated presence in many of these countries to
Yeah,
really
yeah,
be able to make
yeah,
it go.
yeah.
Um, who do you think, what countries are doing a good job in Africa right now, do you feel like, in terms of supporting, this population growth that we're seeing in helping to give rise to the opportunities that we think are going to come over the next decade?
So I would look to the east of the continent, Kenya, Tanzania, are two countries that I think have shown some progress on some of these metrics, and um, you know when you come to West Africa, I mean, Ghana has a lot of potential. It does have a relatively well-educated population. It is a vibrant democracy, but it does have all the challenges that we've talked about. And we in America, we talk about political gridlock.
Right.
Um, yeah, it's orders of magnitude worse in Ghana. I mean, we are democratic, and but it's not really translating into sort of the benefits that you want to see from a democracy like that. So things are not working too well in most parts of West Africa. I mean, Ghana, Nigeria just devalued their currency, and inflation is through the roof. I mean, they have all kinds of challenges with their energy system, and so West Africa, not a whole lot of sort of optimism and whatever. But so to answer your question, East Africa is where I think they've shown some progress. I mean, South Africa is the sort of the giant economy on the continent, but they cannot get their act together. I mean, they have such tremendous challenges with their power system.
Yeah.
And so that is sort of limiting the potential of the economy, the sort of the performance of the economy. So yeah, I would just look east.
Well, maybe one more question. What's got you excited about the opportunities that are coming out of Africa right now? Where are you like, hey, this is, the opportunity here is really, really big.
So I have a lot of hope for the continent, really, despite everything we've talked about. I have a lot of hope because you look at the young population and they are tapped into the world, right? We talked about everyone has a cell phone and they see what's going on, and so you have young, ambitious people on the continent that really want to make something of their lives, and so they know what is out there, and they're fighting for it, and so that is what actually gives me hope that over time it needs the right leadership and bold leadership, but I think over time these young people will make the place a better place.
Excellent. Well, Patrick, really enjoyed the conversation. Looking forward to future ones as well.
Yeah, I've uh, I've really enjoyed it as well, and yeah, thank you for your excellent questions. I appreciate it. Yeah.
Great. All right, we'll move into questions.